He disappeared without a trace from Bewitched, and fans didn't know how sad his real life was. Dick York, who was the first Darrin Stevens, had Hollywood at his feet before he got sick, lost his job, and hurt himself in his last years. There was a man behind the laughter who was fighting to stay alive with an empty house and a family that had to pick up the pieces. How did his wife, kids, and the money he left behind really end up? The broken truth still shocks fans today. Dick York had a life off-screen that was just as complicated and full of layers as the roles he played. York made millions of people laugh, smile, and feel good. But behind the scenes, he was going through a lot of tough personal issues, mostly with his health. Dick York was a heavy smoker for most of his adult life. He was said to smoke up to 3 packs of cigarettes every day. His smoking habit wasn't just something he did alone. Also, it was clear when he worked on the set of Bewitched, and was often seen smoking in between takes. When people weren't talking as much about how bad smoking was for you, York's problem slowly killed him. The damage built up over time, finally causing emphysema, a lung disease that made him unable to breathe, which would follow him to the end of his life. By the late 1980s, York's health had gotten a lot worse. Back in 1989, he needed an air tank to help him breathe. York used to be a lively character with lots of energy and charm, but now he was stuck in bed at home in Rockford, Michigan. Even though he was in a very bad way, his spirit was still very strong. He didn't give in to hopelessness, so he turned his attention and energy toward helping other people. York started acting for life from his bed. It is a private organization that helps the homeless and other people in need. York used his phone as his main tool to fight for people who weren't getting enough help. He used the same voice that had been used for funny lines and emotional speeches to get people to do things. He asked politicians, business leaders, and regular people to help people who had fallen through the cracks in society by giving them money, food, clothes, and other things they needed. He was determined to make a change, even though his health was getting worse. He often said that his phone calls were like lectures on compassion, which encouraged others to do the same. In spite of his physical pain, York's strength and compassion were clear. Sincerely thinking about his life, he said, "I've been blessed. I have no complaints. I've been surrounded by people who love me in radio, on stage, in movies, and on TV. The only things that have gone wrong have been physical." From this point of view, we can see a man who, despite having constant health problems, decided to look at his life through the lens of love and gratitude. Dick York died at Blythe Hospital in East Grand Rapids, Michigan, on February 20, 1992, from problems caused by emphysema. He was only 63 years old. His death marked the end of a long battle, but it also showed how honorably he lived out his last years. York was buried in Plainfield Cemetery in Rockford, Michigan. It was a peaceful place close to the house where he had spent his last days helping other people. Are you interested in Dick York's personal life? It was a beautiful and long, lasting love story between Dick York and his wife, Joan Joey Barbara Alt. Their path together began a long time ago, before they were famous in Hollywood or had health problems. Based on a friendship they made when they were both new to radio. Joan, who was talented and helpful in Dick's life, became his partner in every way, and their marriage showed how to be devoted, persistent, and loving no matter what. On November 17, 1951, they got married in a simple service that showed how much they loved each other and how much they agreed with certain values. As of that moment, Dick was a new character who was still building his career on radio, stage, and film. They had worked together in the radio business when they were younger, and Joan knew him from that time. Their friendship, talent, and respect for each other shaped their relationship. From the beginning, they were always there for each other. Dick and Joan had 5 kids together: Kim, Mandy, Stacy, Christopher, and Matthew. Being a mother and wife was very important to them, and Joan took her part with warmth and determination. During Dick's rise in Hollywood and later health problems, Joan was always there for him and made him feel better. Dick showed up on TV screens all over the country, making millions of people laugh and smile. Behind the scenes, Joan helped him keep his feet on the ground by taking care of their growing family and supporting her husband's work and health. Their marriage was not a fairy tale, though. In the early 1960s, Dick York hurt his back on the set of the movie They Came to Corjora, which made him unable to work. The accident would haunt him for the rest of his life, causing him to be in constant pain and become dependent on painkillers. Eventually, he quit Bewitched at the height of its popularity. During all of this, Joan stayed by his side, not only to care for him, but also to fight hard for his recovery and mental health. Even when money problems started to happen and York's playing chances dried up, Joan never gave up. Joan was very flexible when her family moved from Hollywood to Michigan. She helped make their new home a place where their kids could grow up with love and security, even though there were many problems. As Dick's health got worse in later years from emphysema, a condition made worse by his smoking, Joan became his most trusted nurse and friend. By the late 1980s, Dick was mostly stuck in bed and needed an oxygen tank. Joan helped him keep his respect and comfort. She helped him with his last big project, Acting for Life, a charity he ran out of their bedroom to help the poor and homeless. While Dick called and wrote letters, Joan took care of the details and was always there for him, knowing that his desire to help others gave him meaning. Even though his body was giving out, their bedroom became a mission center, both for healing and for showing how strong love is over time. Joan York was with Dick York when he died on February 20, 1992. They had been together for over 40 years. In the months and years that followed, she kept his memory alive with quiet respect, respecting the life they had built together and the problems they had solved. Joan died in January 2012 at the age of 80, 20 years after her husband. Not only did people remember her as the wife of a famous actress, but also as a strong, devoted, and graceful woman. The place where Dick York lived is something that many people are interested in. From 1964 to 1969, when he was at the height of his fame as Darrin Stevens on Bewitched, Dick York and his wife Joan Joey York found peace and comfort in the Hollywood Hills. In the middle of the 1960s, the couple moved into a cute Spanish-style home with 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The house was located on Scenic Avenue, a street with a great name because it offered peace and beautiful views while still being close to the busy TV and movie industries. Their 1928 home had a red tile roof, arched windows, and small, hillside building that made the most of the view. It looked a bit like an old Hollywood movie theater. With about 296 square feet of space, the house was big enough for the Yorks' growing family, which would eventually have 5 kids: Kim, Mandy, Stacy, Christopher, and Matthew. It turned into more than just a place to sleep. It was the basis of their home life and a safe place to be in the busy world of Hollywood. The home on Scenic Avenue was in a great spot for York's journey. There was a Sunset Gower Studios just a block away, where early seasons of Bewitched were made. There was also a Warner Brothers lot not far away, where some later episodes were finished. Being close to the studios was especially helpful for York because he was having major back problems after an injury he got years before. He was able to keep acting for as long as possible because the short drive helped him save energy and deal with his chronic pain. Although York's health problems got worse over time, he never let them get in the way of his work or his personal life. The terraced avenue house with views of the Hollywood Hills was a quiet haven for the family away from the limelight. In the backyard, there was a small but well-designed pool that was the center of attention. The York kids could play there and Joan could rest. For Dick, the pool was sometimes a healing break that helped him feel better during times of severe physical pain. The house was full of sounds inside, like kids laughing, radio writing, and sometimes the piano. In addition to being a mother and housekeeper, Joan kept the house warm and welcoming. She also supported her husband through the highs and lows of fame, illness, and uncertainty. The Spanish-style charm of the house, with its exposed beams, rounded doors, and cozy nooks, showed how warm and close their marriage was. The family stayed in the Scenic Avenue house for a few more years after York left Bewitched in 1969 because his health was getting worse. The residents were still their personal haven, even though they were no longer a part of the day-to-day entertaining world. The house saw them through the changes in their lives. From walking the red carpet at awards shows to going to the doctor, from getting praise on TV to spending the night with family over a meal and a story. In 1986, Dick York made a quiet but important choice about his life. He moved from California to the small town of Rockford, Michigan, with his wife, Joan Joey York. They moved because they felt like they had to for their family. The Yorks wanted to be closer to Joan's sick mother, so they could help take care of her in her last years. Far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, the simple house at 5370 Belding Road became a safe place for the York family, and finally the site of Dick York's last and most vulnerable story. The house was on a country road in western Michigan, surrounded by gentle hills and wooded areas. It was very different from the house the family had lived in while York was working as a TV actress, but it was picked on purpose. The peace and quiet were very helpful for both caring for York and dealing with his ongoing health problems, which were getting worse by this point. The star, who used to be very active, had a terrible back injury decades ago and became dependent on painkillers. Now he had to deal with emphysema, which was caused by years of heavy smoking. By the late 1980s, York spent most of his time in the living room, mostly in bed or a chair, hooked up to an oxygen tank to help him breathe. His days were marked by short breaths, being physically worn out, and slowly losing the energy he used to have. York was weak, but his mind was still sharp and his heart was still strong. While living in this small house with his wife by his side and medical equipment all around him, York started Acting for Life, a private organization to help the homeless and other people in need. It only took a phone and a lot of kindness for York to turn his living room into a mission control center. He talked on the phone for hours while lying in bed or in his oxygen-assisted recliner. He called lawmakers, business leaders, churches, and volunteers. His pitch was easy to understand but strong. Help the people who were forgotten by doing anything. He asked people to give money, food, clothes, or a place to stay. Even though he had physical problems, York was a constant source of kindness and persuasion. His voice was once used to make people laugh, but now it was used to take a stand. Joan was with him as always. She was in charge of operations, helped plan deliveries of supplies, and gave day-to-day care. Even though their house was simple and old, it had a reason. Many people in Rockford came to admire the Yorks, not for their fame from the past, but for how kind they were now. People who knew Dick during this time recalled him not as a star who had died, but as a man of grace and quiet bravery. Sadly, York's health got worse over the months. He died on February 20, 1992, at the nearby Blahet Hospital in East Grand Rapids. He was 63 years old and had been sick with emphysema. The last thing he did in his life was very important to him, but it was very hard on his body. After he died, the house at 5370 Belding Road was left behind. The rooms that had been full of talk, battle, and strength are now silent. Over the next few years, the house started to fall apart. Neglected and worn down by the weather, it finally gave up. More current news sources say that the building has been torn down. Even though the house is no longer there, it lives on in the memory of Dick York's last years. Years not filled with anger or self-pity, but with love and care. In fact, Dick York was born a long way from the bright lights of Hollywood. Betty York was his mother, and Bernard York was his father. Betty worked as a tailor. During Dick's childhood, the family moved to Chicago. In this lively working-class city, it was his unique voice and natural charm that first caught the attention of a Catholic nun, an attentive teacher who saw promise in the boy's clear voice and ability to express himself. Her support would be the start of an amazing trip into show business. Dick York knew what he wanted to do with his life by the time he was 15. That Brewster Boy, a famous CBS radio show that ran through the 1940s, made him a star. People all over the country liked how young and sure of himself he sounded, and the fact that he could show emotion just through his voice made him stand out in the crowded field of radio theater. Over the next few years, York was in hundreds of radio shows and educational films, building a resume that showed how versatile and hardworking he was. He had been a good actor behind the mic for a long time before he appeared on TV. Early success on the radio led him to New York City, where he switched to acting on stage and started to be taken seriously as an actress. In well-reviewed Broadway shows like Tea and Sympathy and Bus Stop, he was praised for how complex his roles were. He got to work with some of the best actors of the time in these parts, and they helped him get better at live performances, which would help him when he started doing live TV shows. York became well known in the early days of TV dramas, working with stars like Paul Munn and Joanne Woodward in live shows that required accuracy, endurance, and realism. His charm and ability to connect with people quickly made him a fan favorite with both directors and viewers. In Hollywood, he was in movies like My Sister Eileen, 1955, which starred Janet Leigh and Jack Lemmon, and Cowboy, 1958, which starred Glenn Ford. His fame was slowly growing, and it looked like he had a bright future in the business. But in 1959, while shooting the war drama They Came to Cordura with Gary Cooper and Rita Hayworth, York's career took a sudden and permanent turn for the worse. In an important scene, York and Cooper were driving a handcar with actors who were playing soldiers who were hurt. During a take, York pushed up on the handle, and the director yelled, "Cut!" But one of the players grabbed the handle without mean to. Without notice, York found himself lifting the full weight of a grown man, which is about 180 lb. The stress tore the muscles on the right side of his back very badly. Later, York said that they just snapped and let go. That was the beginning of everything. He had pain from this injury for the rest of his life, and it started a slow loss of his physical skills. York did not stop acting right away, even though his hurt was very bad. He kept working, even though it hurt, with a strong will. In 1960, just 1 year after the accident, he gave a strong performance as Bertram Cates in Inherit the Wind, a play based on the famous Scopes monkey trial. Kevin Costner played John Scopes in real life. It was clear from his work in the movie that he still had the emotional depth and screen personality that made him famous. York starred in the ABC comedy drama Going My Way with Gene Kelly and Leo G. Carroll in 1962. He played Tom Sewell, the caring head of a secular youth center. The show had only 1 season, but it showed York's range and his growing interest in parts that are socially aware. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, he also appeared in a huge number of famous TV shows, such as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, The Untouchables, Rawhide, Wagon Train, Father Knows Best, The Virginia, Justice, Route 66, and many more. Maybe even The Twilight Zone. These roles established his reputation as a reliable character actor who could play both serious and funny roles. Dick York played the part that would make or break his career in 1964. Samantha Stevens, played by Elizabeth Montgomery, is married to Darrin Stevens, who is a real person and often gets frustrated. The idea was new and interesting. Samantha is a pretty witch who tries to live a normal life in the suburbs by hiding her magic to please her strict husband. The way York played the part was funny, vulnerable, and heartfelt. His everyman charm grounded the magical parts. Bewitched quickly became one of the most popular TV shows of all time, and it was a mainstay of prime-time entertainment in the 1960s. York was nominated for an Emmy in 1968 for his work, which shows how good he was and how famous he was. That being said, York was in a lot of pain behind the scenes. Years before, in 1959, while shooting They Came to Cordura, he hurt his back badly and it never fully healed. Even so, he found it pretty easy to follow the first 2 seasons of Bewitched. Between takes, the crew built a specially designed slanted wall on set that let him lean and ease pressure on his back. This was possible in part because the production team made accommodations for him. This easy but thoughtful move helped him keep his strength up so he could keep putting on strong performances. Unfortunately, York's health got a lot worse during the third season of the show. What was once a manageable accident turned into a very bad spinal disease that got worse over time. There were a lot of delays in filming because York sometimes needed help walking or just couldn't stand for long amounts of time. Because of this, the show's scripts were often changed to work with his limits. In some shows, Darrin wasn't even in the room much, and York spent the whole story lying on a couch or bed. In some, he was written out completely, with the note saying that Darrin was away on work. One of the scariest things that happened while shooting the episode from the 5th season called Daddy Does His Thing. York was already sick when she got to work. He had been taking strong medicines for almost 10 days because he had a fever of 105 degrees. Even so, he insisted on working. He laid in his changing room with the chills and felt tired after getting dressed and put on makeup. He wore a sheepskin coat in the middle of summer one time because he was so cold. On set, he worked with Morris Evans, who played Samantha's dad, on a special effects shot that needed an in-kai light to dance across his eyes. York was sitting on top of a high platform when the light started to flicker. He started to feel lost and sick. He told Gibby, a member of the group, "I think I need to get down." Gibby reached out to help, but York fell down before he could get to him. The next thing he remembered was waking up on the floor, having had such a bad seizure that he bit his tongue open before anyone could separate his teeth. York talked to William Asher, the director and producer of the show, from his hospital bed. Now was the time. What did York say when Asher asked, "Do you want to quit?" "If it's okay with you, Billy," she said. She made her choice with shame and sadness. There were 5 seasons and more than 150 shows before Dick York had to leave Bewitched. He didn't want to, but his body made him. With quiet grace, the change was made. York was replaced by Dick Sargent for the 6th season of the show in 1969, and he stayed until the end of the show in 1972. In a strange twist, Sargent was offered the part of Darrin in 1964, but turned it down in favor of a short-lived show called Broadside. York left the stage, leaving behind a legacy of toughness and professionalism. This was his second shot. Off-screen, York was very well liked and admired by his co-stars. York and Agnes Moorehead, who played the witchy, critical mother, in-law and Dora, were close friends off-screen, even though they often fought on screen. It was said that Moorehead was devastated when York's departure was announced. He knew both the professional loss and the personal struggle that led to it. Following Dick York's quick and painful exit from Bewitched in the late 1960s, his life went through a huge change for the worse. After he left, the next 18 months were some of the hardest of his life. York spent most of his time in bed because of the constant pain of his degenerative spinal injury and the numbing effects of the prescription drugs he had to take every day. Even though these strong drugs helped him for a short time, they threw him deeper into a physical and mental fog that left him in constant pain and more dependent on them. York wrote about this scary time in his life in a very honest and emotional way in his unfinished book, The Seesaw Girl and Me. The book was more than just a look at fame and loss. It was beautifully written and terribly honest. It was a tribute to the thing that gave him the most power. His wife, Joan Alt, who he playfully called Joey, was the Seesaw Girl in the title, a reference to the fun times they spent courting each other and the love that got them through their hardest times. Joan was by his side the whole time he was falling deeper and deeper into addiction and depression. She gave him unconditional love, unending care, and the mental support he needed to stay alive, was called to serve. York was in pain in more than one way. It affected the mind, the heart, and the spirit. He was devastated when he lost his acting job, which had once opened up a world of opportunities for him. Even more than the work itself, he was sad about the person he had become because of it. At the same time, he was suffering from unbearable feelings that turned everyday life into a kind of torture. "In my head there was a band." He wrote that bagpipes were played all day and night. It kept going on and on and on. These vivid, scary images followed him around all the time and made his physical and mental pain worse. "The fans whisper to you and the walls whisper to you," he said, explaining how pain and addiction made people feel strangely and terrifyingly alone. Sometimes the TV flashes in a way that makes you lose it, and you know that your wife has put her hand over your mouth to keep you from biting off your tongue. Sleep seemed like a faraway dream, and each night seemed to last forever, filled with worry, confusion, and hallucinations. In order to cool down, York even recorded rain on tape so that he could listen to something soothing and human instead of the annoying drone of the bagpipes. Even after all this time and pain, York never gave up the fight. He fought back with Joan's love by his side. It hurt a lot, but he slowly started to pull himself out of the fog of addiction and get back what was left of his identity. By the early 1980s, he had done some of the worst movies of his career and was trying to make a small comeback. York did a few things, including parts on two popular primetime TV shows, Simon and Fantasy Island, even though his health was still getting worse. Even though these small roles were nothing like the lead roles he had in his younger years, they were a quiet win for York because they showed that he could still perform, still make a difference, and still hold on to the craft that had once made him happy. His comeback didn't last long, though. York's agent forgot to register with the Screen Actors Guild because of a mistake that wasn't his fault. As a result, he stopped getting interview calls and job offers. York quietly quit the entertainment business in 1984, maybe because he was tired or frustrated or just realized that Hollywood had moved on. He wasn't angry. By then, he was more interested in health, living a simple life, and helping others. After he retired, York's main goal was not to become famous, but to help other people. He started the organization Acting for Life from his simple home in Rockford, Michigan, as a way to help people in need. Even though he was sick and couldn't do much, he used his phone as a refuge to call politicians, business leaders, and regular people all the time, and ask them to help the homeless and poor by giving their time, resources, and money. Even though his body was getting weaker, his spirit stayed kind and positive. What do you think about Dick York? Please tell us what you think in the box below. We hope this video was helpful for you. Kindly click like, share, and subscribe. If you enjoy the video, glad you watched and see you in the next film. Thank you.